and they were there. He was so nervous because if this did not work, they would surely put him under a citizen's arrest for being a public ass. If he did not do this right, he would die, and Tails would too now because he was doing it with him and they would throw rocks at them. "Using these Chaos Emeralds," said Shadow, "I wish up out the gods to grant my wish that you can bring back Sonic back up to normal healthy life here." The bag glowed a whole lot and made screamy noises, and a big stick of light came down from the sky and hit the bag, and all of the Ultra Chaos Emeralds started to go crazy. They were making sounds like frogs and trains and horses and hitting into each other and shooting out lights and being basically the circus. Then everything in the world just became super bright, and no one could see a thing for a moment, and they could not hear, they noticed either, because there was a ringing sound in their ears. It was so crazy, like being inside a marshmallow filled of ringing sounds. Then everyone peeked out behind their hands at where they were looking, and all the Ultra Chaos Emeralds were gone, and Sonic's coffin was open, and look, there was Sonic. Sonic was standing on his coffin, and he was on top of it, smiling and not black anymore, but regular old blue Sonic. Yes, it really happened. By now, Joshua and I have read a handful of books for the English Club Project. Respectable people have called each of them some variation of the phrase, "the worst book ever." But the problem is, I've really, sincerely, truly enjoyed each and every one of them. I would read passages from Empress Teresa over and over just to immerse myself in a completely alien mind. With Trigger Warning, I was alive with theories, my ears perked up for the dog whistles that ultimately convinced me of its irony. I'm haunted by the subtextual tragedy of Handbook for Mortals, the pathos of the egotistical maniac in Reaper's Creek. And these are all really hard facts to come to terms with, mostly because I'm not sure how serious I am. We live in a bitterly ironic time. It's hard to just like something, impossible to enjoy it uncritically. In real life, I spent several years running a creative writing critique group, and it taught me how to talk about writing, regardless of its quality. I've read things that make Norman Boutin seem like Shakespeare's second coming. But whether the writing is good or not, I've never come across any work where thoughtful, balanced critique and analysis wasn't a constructive experience, for both the reader and the writer. So, I've been struggling with this question for a while. What makes a work of art good? Or better yet, what makes something worthy of critique? I mean, analysis through every lens, deep dives into its themes, picking apart everything that makes it work. The kind of intellectual immortality that catapults so many dead old men into literary canon. What makes something worth that kind of time? Well, after reading many of the worst books ever, I don't think anything is unworthy of critique. The tools of literary analysis aren't reserved for whoever wins the lottery of canon. So why shouldn't we treat Norman Boutin as Shakespeare's second coming? Why is something being cringe or flawed in technique a reason not to engage with the work at all? Why shouldn't my favorite work of literature be a Sonic the Hedgehog fanfiction? Sonic High School is a novella-length, alternate universe Sonic the Hedgehog fanfiction published in 2012 by Dark Doom Firemaster. Don't let the blue Cyclops with Pupula Duplex turn you off. I've never really been a Sonic fan, but Firemaster doesn't demand readers know anything beyond what the source material's characters look like. At its core, the story follows the eponymous character's endeavors to consummate his relationship with his girlfriend Amy, navigating usually violent high school drama and a testicular disease that threatens him and everyone who touches him. It's best known for its non-sequitur dialogue, over-specific and shocking figurative language, and tenuous grasp on human and animal reproduction. And I am convinced it's a work of literary genius. To best defend that position, I'm going to assume ignorance of the work and walk chapter by chapter through the halls of Sonic High School. Sonic High School begins, as everyone's first story does, with the main character waking up. The first thing we learn about Sonic is that he's fast. Sonic put his clothes on really fast and ran out of his room because he is fast. Ignoring the disproportionately ominous warnings of his mother, he makes it to the bus just in time and catches up with his friends, Knuckles and Tails. You'll notice right off that the dialogue is very declarative and usually completely superfluous. "He is late," said Knuckles to Tails, really doesn't add much when the last two paragraphs both tell and show us that Sonic is late. Likewise, we don't need Knuckles to outright state that he's bad when he takes up a space meant for two people. But he does, and the reason this is bad is that it's against the rules of both man and God. The teenagers arrive at school without much event. "We're at school now. It's time to go to class," Tails informs us. Sonic's first class is English, which he dislikes, seeing as how in English class you don't run and go fast. The teacher's name is Miss Lesson, and today is journal day. The journals the students have been writing in, until now unbeknownst to us, are due, and she reads a passage at random from Sonic's journal. I think I just have to read you this one in its entirety. "Dear Journal, I called the doctor today about a problem. I have a problem with my balls. They are itchy and it is difficult to sit still with them because they are so itchy. I have to back up against stucco surfaces and rub up and down on them to relieve the itchiness. No creams have worked. Creams only make my ball sweat smell like the breath of a thoroughbred, and I think Amy, my girlfriend, noticed. I hope my doctor calls. Love, Sonic." Sonic, who is the fastest, fails to stop Miss Lesson in time. The shame makes Sonic's rage build up inside him like a pool of lava in a volcano. Unable to handle his emotions of being embarrassed and mad and sad, but more embarrassed, he leaves class and screams, "This sucks!" and curse words, too, into his locker. Tails, who is smart, offers Sonic some consolation. But Knuckles, who is bad, adds an unwelcome interjection that sends Sonic running to his next class, which he also doesn't like for reasons we can only speculate. Sonic runs into his girlfriend, Amy, and performs a dance for her. They kiss to everyone's entertainment, but don't have sex, as class will start any minute now. When class does begin, Rouge informs Amy of Sonic's problems with his balls and penis and butthole, leaving Sonic agog, wondering what high school drama will come next. So, that's Chapter 1. I want to run a fine-tooth comb through it because, like any good first chapter, this is the work in microcosm. On a technical level, this is some of the worst writing ever. Sentences drag on and on. It's not interesting to talk about spelling and grammar, but suffice it to say that Firemaster has a lot to learn. The tone is all over the place, too casual, too formal, mostly declarative, slightly conversational. But there's something else below the surface, a mystery that keeps you interested long after you're done laughing at how ridiculous it is. Just who the hell wrote this? Let's lay out everything we've learned from Chapter 1. Our narrator is no fool, but his education is very piecemeal and he's lacking a lot in experience. He does his best to come off as intelligent, peppering random words he knows into the text. Sonic's mom leers at him, he has to back up against stucco surfaces, and he smells like the breath of a thoroughbred. But the narrator also has a woefully simplified view of people and their relationships. Every character is reducible to one descriptor. Sonic is fast, Sonic's mom is a mother, Tails is smart, Knuckles is bad, Miss Lesson is a teacher, Amy is a girlfriend, and Rouge is well endowed. The narrator's understanding of romantic relationships, and thereby his characterization of Sonic, is predicated on a need for sex. In history class, no one had an issue with Sonic and Amy passionately making out, and they wouldn't have had a problem with them having sex were it not for the fact that class would start soon. Much in the same way, and for many of the same reasons, the narrator's understanding of high school is blatantly lacking. Minor spoilers, the narrator presents it as self-evident that a public high school costs thousands in tuition and fees to be paid by the student, and that in detention you're locked in a room for days without food or water. The idea of journal day being an assignment, the teacher reading a random person's entry aloud, and Sonic writing about his reproductive health knowing all of this is insane. It feels more like one of those coming to school in your underwear dreams. There's also a subtle but present conflation of authority with divinity. Nowhere is this clearer than when it's outright stated. Knuckles sitting where two people could sit on a bus is against the rules of both man and God. It's a funny hyperbole, but it's almost as if the narrator expects us to take it at face value. Let's take a look at a couple of the technical mistakes. Girlfriend, the elusive prize Sonic pines after for the entirety of the story, is always rendered in camel case, and you'll recall that the phrase curse words is proper-cased. This invokes reverential capitalization, a phrase I found on Wikipedia just now when I was googling why God's pronouns are capitalized in King James Bibles. This reverence implies the inferiority of the writer, as though bus drivers are authorities on par with deities, and girlfriends and curse words are icons of another world. Love him or hate him, the narrator feels very small and isolated. Most of what he feels like he should care about exists in a world he can barely understand or relate to. That's what makes the conversational tone so special. If nothing else, at least you can understand the narrator, maybe even be his friend. One thing Sonic High School is most famous for is its insane, disgusting, overly specific, entirely too long similes. And don't worry, we'll unpack a lot of them. But it's important to understand why the narrator spends so much time in these digressions. The similes in Sonic High School are an invitation for connection, an outstretched hand to the reader. The very first simile in the story is Sonic huffing and puffing like he was doing the Cupid Shuffle for the first time. It's as though the narrator is nudging you, asking, "Am I right? Am I right?" Well, yes, I actually know exactly what you mean. I remember sweaty 5th grade dances, and I've seen cartoons of pools of lava in a volcano, so I can understand the intensity of Sonic's rage. Something is clearly and consistently working below the surface, making this more than just a bad fanfiction. In Sonic High School, the narrator is part of the story, a character as fictional as the hedgehog that started it all, and he undergoes a parallel narrative that frames Sonic's journey. So there are 3 categories of framing devices, which vary in terms of the relevance they have to the plots they encircle. Category 1 is frames that just exist. I don't feel like researching this, but I get the vibe it was like a trend in the 1800s. The examples that are jumping to mind are Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter or Poe's The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. A character completely unrelated to the story uncovers a manuscript or something, and passes it along to us without any doctoring. It's mostly for a sense of authenticity, I think, but it can be a bit twee. I don't really get what our friend Edgar thought he was doing, talking about a Mr. Poe in the preface, but whatever. Point is, it doesn't change the main narrative. This is also common in anthologies and many types of media. I just saw that older horror movie VHS, and it used this technique. Category 2 frame stories are the ones that are bad. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's the ones that affect the narrative and are bad. These aren't an anthology or a dude finding a manuscript. It's a character telling the story, giving a speech, writing a letter, a journal, a fan fiction. It's easiest to fall into the Category 2 trap with epistolary novels. These most easily highlight the danger of framing your narrative in the first place. Like the term implies, you're imposing limitations that just wouldn't be there in a more traditional narrative. Let's say you write a story in the form of a journal, like This Is Why I Hate You by Onision or The Tsar's Madman by Jan Gross. It's a sacrifice of narrative clarity for voice, but often that sacrifice just isn't worth it. It's voicey and even realistic that a person writing a journal would have a spotty memory and struggle to cohesively connect interrelated thoughts. It's alienating to a reader to have interweaving flashbacks and flash forwards, or moments derailed by a narrator telling you, "Oh wait, I forgot something about the entry I made 20 pages ago." Another problem with Category 2 is that the frame of a story is there whether the author wants it there or not. If a narrative starts as a journal, it can't transition into a more traditional narrative without severely compromising the cohesion. So spoilers for This Is Why I Hate You, the penultimate journal entry ends with the narrator dying. Then, the last entry is his girlfriend explaining that she wrote one last entry in his voice because she knew him so well. I don't think I need to tell you how ridiculous that is. Or it'll raise questions that you don't want your readers asking, like, how long is a letter supposed to be? In the past couple years, no book has made me angrier than Elizabeth Gilbert's City of Girls. Gilbert's conceit with City of Girls was a story about a woman who was unabashedly sexual and not punished for it by the narrative. A noble goal for a book to pursue. The problem is that it's framed as a letter the main character wrote in her old age, to someone who believes her to be their father's former lover. Imagine you think your dad had a secret mistress, and when you ask the woman if it's true, in reply you get 500 pages detailing this random woman's every sexual escapade. Your dad doesn't show up until the very end. The story was fine, but I couldn't take it seriously because Gilbert chose to tell it this exact way. But then you have Category 3, present but unobtrusive. These stories take the imposition of Category 2 and then use it to their advantage. I like to think of them as stained glass stories. Part of the fun is putting together the full picture from the highly stylized pieces. One of the best and most ubiquitous examples of Category 3 would be Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. The frame is a group of pilgrims telling each other stories, and each story is a reflection of the speaker's personality and social class, even their interactions with the other narrators. The key here is that the narration is so influenced by the frame story that explicit framing is optional. In other words, Chaucer could have just cut the prologue and we'd still be able to draw a line from the story to its speaker. This makes defining Category 3 tricky. Every writer has biases, and every work of fiction they create is going to be unique to them in some way. What distinguishes Category 3 frame stories from biased writing is that the narrators are separate from the plot, but part of the fiction. This is not coincidentally exactly how trollfics work. Remember in the trigger warning episode how we pointed out that there's no way this is a serious work? J.A. Johnstone wrote a story from Canterbury Tales without an end scene. The narrator is fictional, a caricature of her late uncle's target audience. Remember My Immortal, the fanfiction I'm not going to talk about because trans women are women and Sonic High School is too similar? You ever notice how the writer of that story was a bit too stereotypical to be real? Dark Doom Firemaster's work is no exception to this. The narrator is young, inexperienced, fascinated by sex and other things forbidden to him, and at times problematic. This caricature of a young boy is meant to evoke an emotional response, a form of long-term shock humor. Sonic High School, by and large, was meant to be laughed at and taken at face value. But to ignore what's going on behind the curtain or to play along with a joke would gloss over Firemaster's success in his characterization. So with this view of our narrator in mind, let's apply the same lens over the rest of the work. Sonic's anger takes corporal form, so foul that the neighbors could smell it, and they all had a meeting at night about what to do about it, and they decided that they would just put fans on outside, and if it really started to smell again, they would do something else. This digression, while funny, establishes that Sonic's health issues have far-reaching effects, which will become very important later on. We also see again that technical issues are a part of the story and here to stay. Sonic's line, "Nothing," said Sonic, is evidence enough of that. So Sonic's in his room sulking, and Tails comes to visit him. There's something very charming about the redundancy of, Sonic was in his room, so he looked out to the window and saw Tails flying there with his flying tails. Again, the narrator doesn't want even the remote possibility of you not understanding him. Then there's this interesting moment between Sonic and Tails. "This day was the worst," said Sonic. Sonic cried a little, and Tails put his hand under his face to catch his tears. Tears can stain a carpet. Tails hugged Sonic and said, "I am always here for you." The prom is tonight also. Do you feel that whiplash too? There was the beginning of a very intimate scene, but then everything gets yanked in a completely different direction, away from the emotions the narrator couldn't commit to. It's as though he touched a hot stove and flinched back. What follows is the least interesting part of Sonic High School. Sonic and Tails go to prom on Ghost Island, which is shaped like a skull. They very quickly realize they're the only high schoolers there and explore a haunted house where they run into Eggman. "Are you here for the Chaos Emeralds?" Sonic shook his fists at Eggman and Tails ran at him, but what an idiot he was because a cage fell down from the top of the sky and trapped Tails. There's not much to talk about this scene, I just love the tone there. The prom arc continues with Sonic facing off against Eggman. We're fully immersed in action here, but there's a line or two that hints at what's in the narrator's mind. "I'm coming for you," said Sonic. "Now you are mine," shouted Sonic right into Eggman in his ear. Eggman escapes, but Amy's whereabouts are unknown and Tails is still in the cage. Sonic's fear for Tails' safety really shows here. He thinks of sex with Amy only briefly before resuming focus on his friend. "Where is the key to open Tails' cage?" said Sonic to Amy. "We need to open Tails' cage. He can't get out of the cage." They find a painting, and Sonic drives his big, strong hand right through the painting like a bodybuilder, and found the safe behind the painting. "Maybe the password is his name," said Amy. It was not, and Sonic knew it before Sonic put it into the safe lock. "I love her for her body," thought Sonic. Anyways, they unlock the safe, free Tails, and that's the end of the chapter. Even if you haven't read all of Sonic High School, you can probably tell that this plot is very by the numbers. It's the closest thing to a normal Sonic the Hedgehog plot we're going to see in this entire work. There are no lasting consequences to anything that happens here. Eggman is only mentioned from this point on, even then only a couple times. I think, given the last scene before the arc began and the small nods to the narrator's real interests, that this dullness is intentional. It reminds me of that feeling of forced normalcy after an interpersonal relationship is pushed just a bit too far for comfort. You go through the motions, but that moment in Sonic's bedroom lingers in the back of your mind. Sonic did like in the first chapter and went to school again. Now it's lunchtime and Sonic was in the lunchroom. Sonic was telling all of the people at his table who were Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, Espio, and Charmy Bee about what did happen yesterday, but Tails already knew, so he was nodding his head like a good friend. These new characters are no exceptions to the narrator's one personality trait per character rule. Espio is athletic, Charmy Bee is effeminate, and Shadow is dark. But despite the superficial personalities, there's some genuine camaraderie to their sophomoric banter, along with some new SAT words the narrator just learned. "Do not hurt my feelings," said Charmy. Charmy was used to being hectored, so he was able to remove himself from his potent fury. It's also interesting to me the meta way the previous arc was hand-waved. Knuckles said, "You should stop going on these cool adventures because high school is more important." And Sonic knew he was right because it's called Sonic High School, and it should be more about the high school part. So, the focus shifts to Espio, who is interested in Rouge. Sonic and Tails play wingman, securing a date between the chameleon and the bat. Again, the camaraderie and collectivism is very nice, if for the wrong reasons. Sonic and Tails and Espio were stoked and high-fived right there. By the time this night ended, one of them would have done their first sex. The chapter ends on another classic Fire Master cliffhanger. Sonic and Tails wonder how Espio will put sex in Rouge without getting in trouble. Meanwhile, Espio walks away while holding on to Rouge's boobies because they are now boyfriend and girlfriend and it's allowed to do it. At this point, following a very tense return to form, the narrative begins to expand. On the bus, Knuckles sits right in the middle of the aisle, which he usually did not do, but sometimes did when not everyone was on the bus. It looked like Espio and Rouge were not on the bus because they were too busy getting ready to go sex tonight, now that they are boyfriend and girlfriend. Knuckles laid across the aisle, even more stretched out than when he just sat across two seats, because now the limits were the Alpha and the Omega. The uncertainty our heroes feel for their friend is assuaged by a fortune cookie whose magical fortune reads, "The path to glory begins at the base of your friend's penis." As if on cue, Tails calls with an idea. He can give Espio his invisibility hat, which he had made for a science competition. Sonic smiles, so wide like the King of Fire finding out he had burned down New York City with only his fire powers. Sonic's interest in Espio's success is more selfish than it seems at first glance. Sonic thought that it would be good that Espio would get sex into Rouge, so then he could explain it to Sonic, and Sonic would know how to find Amy's sex spots even better, because otherwise he would have to read about it online, because all he knew about was kissing, which wasn't really sex, but it was probably kind of the same thing, and Sonic would just read about it online before talking about it anyway, and he would know the right words for the things then. Jesus Christ. Sonic and the narrator aren't experts when it comes to sex, but still view it as a rite of passage. Sure enough, Sonic calls it a rite of passage when soliciting sex from Amy later on that night, on his Sonic computer using Sonic Instant Messenger. When Amy vehemently denies his request, Sonic was so shocked his brain must have felt like a total idiot. It's important to note that Sonic the Hedgehog is the center of the world, but he is not its god. Compare the fact that everything is named after him and he beats all of the final bosses of the video games he plays because he was like an alien sent to Earth to destroy records set by others, to his ongoing genital disease and inability to copulate with his girlfriend. The contradiction of ego and victim complex is another reflection of the narrator's mental state as a teenage boy grappling with theory of mind, a theme which continues into the next chapter, when the narrator steps entirely out of his self-insert's perspective. Chapter 6 has the distinction of including Firemaster's first sex scene, an insane and graphic ritual that will become a trademark of the work after this. Espio arrives at Rouge's house after he looked at the computer and read about what to do and what the right words were so he would know how it works and how to say it right so no one would make fun of him. Like many teenage boys from the narrator's culture, it's not clear whether achieving sex is something they desire for the sake of their own attraction or for their reputation with their peers. Rouge appears before him, and Espio thought that she looked like the hottest woman in the world that he could see from here. And then the romance begins. "Where are you taking me on our date tonight?" whispered Rouge in a sex-filled voice. Espio had thought this one over on the way over so that he could say it right the first time and get her to do what he wanted. That's sex. "Well," said Espio, "just let me put on this science hat and we will begin sex." Rouge looked shocked, but she probably was excited too. Espio could tell they both had an erection. Under the cover of the invisibility hat, they have sex on Rouge's front lawn, where there was plenty of room around them for activities. Looks like someone's dad showed him Step Brothers. It is abundantly, ridiculously apparent that the narrator does not understand sex and sexuality, but it's also clear that he's desperate to be understood. Just listen to all these similes in the sex scene alone. Espio's penis was really big from looking at Rouge, like when he is in church and it's so boring but you just get a boner anyway. Rouge's vagina looked like a surprised ghost. Espio's penis approached Rouge like a plane flying down at the airport, but instead of being full of businessmen, it was full of Espio's creamy Italian salad dressing. Espio messed around with her boobs and face like she was the X-Men arcade game. Espio slapped his big, awesome penis from side to side like a hot dog windshield wiper. Espio moved his penis in circles in her butthole like he was building a golf course and digging out the back nine. So moved by Espio's Mauve Avenger, Rouge shouts, "Create a generation in me," and that was what happened. They put their penis and vagina and balls away, and Espio took off the invisibility hat, and it was like nothing ever happened, but they both know it did because they were there for it. What sticks with me about this scene is how one and done it is, how little the narrator dwells on it afterwards. With the main character obsessed with having sex with his girlfriend, the blasé tone feels a bit contradictory, right? Despite his admiration for the hedgehog, Espio is not Sonic. The level of connection and intimacy the narrator has for Sonic just isn't there for Espio. There's no sense of triumph you'd expect from someone like Sonic or the narrator. These scenes, gross and weird and wrong as they are mere explorations. The only problem is, given the Baroque level of detail and the anatomical facts that are just incorrect, it's ambiguous just what the narrator is exploring. After Espio's resounding success, the focus shifts back to Sonic, who is worried about Amy because she was his only girlfriend even if she denied his sex offer, so he ran to her door and barged it down like it was made of nothing. Once again, Sonic finds Amy tied to a bed. "It was awful," said Amy. "He came into my room in the evening and tied me up on this bed and messed up the things in my room." Amy was right. Her room looked messy. "So get a maid," said Sonic, always thinking about a solution to problems. "Who tied you up? Who was it? Be calm, Amy. Calm down and talk to me." Sonic patted Amy on the back to help her. "It was Shadow. I saw him outside his house next door with a machine gun and a sword, going in his house to kill his mom, and he saw me. He knew I saw him, so he tied me up like a brigand." Of course, what Sonic's most worried about is the implication that her denial of his sex offer wasn't really from her. All the same, so much has happened that Amy isn't ready to take that step with him. Sonic and Amy return to school, where everyone else was besides them, to find out that overnight, Rouge has become fat. Pregnancy fat. The revelation is cut short by the sudden appearance of Shadow, who denies having killed his mother. Amy shook around because she was all nervous, and her smaller than Rouge's but still good boobs wiggled a little, and Sonic thought it was cool to see and he wanted to support her. "I did not kill my mom. I was going into my house to protect her from Dr. Eggman," Shadow said. "Ah, okay," said Sonic. And Sonic and Espio went to class because it started and they are still in the high school hallway. Somehow, this justifies having tied up Amy in the previous chapter. Whatever. Later on, Sonic speaks to Espio on Sonic Messenger. Espio reveals his intentions to terminate Rouge's pregnancy, sparking a wave of emotion in Sonic. Sonic was upset because Rouge's baby would not survive it. In fact, Rouge's baby would die. "But if you really want to do it," said Sonic in Sonic Messenger, "that's okay too, because it is your decision." At lunch the next day, Tails reveals that he won the science competition, which Sonic had entirely forgotten about. He tries to apologize, but Tails is inconsolable. "Kiss my ass!" screamed Tails to Sonic and flew out of the room with his flying tails. But Sonic can't dwell on his own drama for long. He distracts Rouge while Espio slips a pill into her salad. Rouge ate salads because she is thin. "Oh, uh-oh, what is this?" said Rouge, suddenly looking like a shocked woman. What is wrong?" asked Espio. He was worrying that Rouge found the abortion pill in her salad and was looking at it. "I think I am having my baby. Here it comes." Rouge said this before she could even eat the abortion pill, so everyone knew the baby was coming for real. "Oh no," said all of them together but Rouge. Rouge lied down on the ground and they put a curtain around her so no one could really see what was going on because it was gonna be gross. They could see a baby start to come out of her butt and it was crying a lot. Everyone wanted the baby to shut up already because they were just trying to have lunch, but now there is a baby coming out in the lunchroom at high school. Listen to the tone there. I love the angry way that the narrator talks about babies. You can tell it's from personal experience, maybe like a baby sibling or a cousin. Mrs. Lesson, who doubles as a school nurse, delivers the baby out of Rouge's butt. Mrs. Lesson held the baby in her hands while it was still crying and held it out to everyone. "Look at it," said Mrs. Lesson. Rouge's baby was red and had long hair and big, white fists. Vector quickly surmises that Rouge's baby looks like Knuckles, and runs, like a crocodile would, to find Knuckles to tell him that what he said. Rouge was still on the ground looking all tired and sore, and Mrs. Lesson was rubbing her butt because it was hurting from the baby that came out when she gave birth to her baby. This dang baby was still crying. Knuckles arrives on the scene. "Wagyu," he said, making that sound when he saw the baby, Rouge's baby, that looked like him. The baby was still crying. Knuckles is irate. He thought about his horoscope that he read this morning and it said, "Your biggest fear will come true, so you better watch out." Now he knew what that meant. It was about Rouge's baby, because Knuckles did not want this responsibility. It is harder than having a dog. Naturally, Espio takes issue with the fact that Rouge had Knuckles' baby. Vector holds Knuckles back, restraining him like a crocodile seatbelt that could also talk to you. Kept apart from each other, the two resolved to fight the next day. Rouge's baby stopped crying and said, "No, come back. You don't have to fight Espio." But it was too late because Knuckles was so gone by then. By the way, we're never given any satisfactory reason why the baby can talk. After the school day ends, we're treated to an interesting exchange between Sonic and Amy. Sonic took out his Sonic phone on the way home and called his girlfriend Amy. "Hey Amy, so did you decide if you wanted sex?" said Sonic. "You know," said Amy, "Sonic, I am just too stressed out and nervous by everything going on at high school. Things are so crazy." "Damn," said Sonic and hung up the phone. Sonic heads to Espio's house to help him prepare. Espio tells him that Knuckles has kidnapped Charmy Bee. Now the stakes are raised even further, because the gods will crush my soul even if Charmy Bee is an annoying idiot loser. Now more resolved than ever, the two continue into Espio's room, where Tails is waiting. The moment Tails saw Sonic, his face turned into a salad of anger, the devil, and lava. Chapter 10 opens with the most 2012 middle schooler line. "Why are you here?" screamed Tails with the anger of a million angry birds. Sonic was a mixture of mad and sad and frustrating because he did not know what he could do to get Tails to be his friend again. At times like this, Sonic thought about Amy's fine body because it set his mind at ease. Tails throws Sonic a blue book, the journal from Chapter 1. He hadn't participated in the science competition after all, but instead snuck into Mrs. Lesson's room to steal the journal. Tails flies away, leaving Sonic and Espio to reflect on their two respective fights, one of the body and one of the mind. The next day, there was a crowd of people around him that included Sonic, who looked worried, Rouge, who looked worried and with her baby, and Vector, who was smiling. Also in the crowd was Tails, and with him Cream the Rabbit, who was Charmy Bee's girlfriend. Cream was a little woman and pretty smart, but not as smart as Tails. Her boobs were smaller than both Amy and Rouge's, but they were still high quality in their own way. Okay, so actually I'm just going to read you the rest of the chapter. You need to see exactly what happens and the way it's narrated to fully understand how important this scene is to the narrator's development. Knuckles charged at Espio with his fists like an elephant running at a hunter trying to kill him for his powers, but Espio jumped out of the way and onto the wall like a pro jumper, which he learned how to do last night. Espio jumped at Knuckles with a kick move, and Knuckles punched at his foot, and they met with a purple and red explosion of power that knocked them both back. They continued to jump around and attack each other, and they did this for a while. It was difficult to watch for everyone. Rouge was in the crowd with her baby. "This is so difficult to watch," said Rouge. "Violence should never be a solution to conflict," said Rouge's baby, peeking out between his hands. "You are right. Why do people do this like this? I hate it," said Rouge to Rouge's baby. Rouge had become a different person since she had a baby. She used to be only sexy, but now Rouge was sexy and matronly. "Yes, fuck this evil world," said Rouge's baby. Rouge then revealed her boob to her baby and had him eat from it as a baby would do. Rouge's baby thought this was the best part about being a baby because not everyone would get cool boobs like this delivered to them on their doorstep like a milkman. Babies did not have much to worry about anyways, so Rouge's ace boobs made paradise a realty for baby. "I have a feeling," said Rouge's baby, "you should lie down and relax." So Rouge lied down on her back and the fight continued to go on. Knuckles and Espio were both bloody and gross looking, like two waiters who were holding messy foods and then walked into each other, causing the meals to launch into the air and then fall down on them and ruin the nice clothes they got from the store. They were breathing hard and were tired, but they kept going, jumping and kicking and punching and running. It looked like two people doing a dance, but hitting each other also. Knuckles kicked his feet out at Espio, but Espio jumped up and dodged them and came back down and hit Knuckles in the mouth and knocked him onto the floor/ground. "Is this enough yet? Are we done?" shouted Espio to Knuckles. "How will this ever end?" Knuckles looked up from the ground at Espio standing over him. Knuckles had a Twinkie in his eye as he looked up at Espio and crawled towards him. Espio did not do anything but watch him and feel dangerous. "Come closer," said Knuckles in a whisper voice. So Espio bent down and put his face to Knuckles's. Knuckles looked up and down Espio's sweaty purple body and into his eyes and said, "I respect you," and then grabbed his face as gentle as a deer and kissed him on the mouth. When Knuckles kissed him, he did it extra hard, sometimes with his eyes shut and sometimes looking into Espio's deep yellow eyes that looked like a circus of loving men. Their tongues met in the middle of their mouths like two chicken cutlets that were acting like cats that loved each other. When Espio was watching fighting videos last night, he was not expecting he was going to have to do kissing too. But he liked it. They went on kissing for a full minute while everyone watched, wondering if they were done fighting or just taking a break to kiss. Finally, the back part of Knuckles' body began to lift off of the ground while his mouth was still making out with Espio. Eventually, the power became so strong that his mouth was removed from Espio and their spit was like a shiny extension cord that connected an appliance to a wall outlet. Knuckles then began to glow while floating in the air, and the whole place became a little windy. On the side, Tails said to Cream, "Wow, I know what this is. This is a rare moment of science we will never see probably again in a lifetime or ever. It is called a body donation, and it was invented by Einstein. It is when someone reaches a moment of such powerful love they can choose to restart their lives as part of the person they love. Einstein invented this by making his wife love him so much one night during a romance pasta dinner that she became a baby that was like him. But then he killed his wife, the baby, because he thought it was too dangerous to have her live on in the world without testing it in a laboratory first. It is a fact that if it looks like magic, it is not magic. It is science, so deal with it. Knuckles glided on the wind forward through the crowd of people in front of him and into Rouge's mouth, where he disappeared into. It was a good thing Rouge's baby had premonitions and told her to lie down, as then Knuckles did a U-turn in Rouge's sex-filled body and came out of her butt as a newborn baby that looked like Espio. This was all science. If we take the author's note at face value, this was intended to be the pinnacle of Sonic High School. And in many ways it is. It's a circling vortex of emotion and lust, so extreme that it can only feel wrong. And it's gross. There are tongues like two chicken cutlets that were acting like cats that loved each other. It's a middle schooler's first foray into puberty, at once a development in his feelings towards others and a final look back to the past. But I don't believe that either the narrator or Firemaster intended for this to really be the end. There's more to the narrator's development than him coming to terms with the basest levels of his sexuality. This represents a growth in the narrator's character, sure, but it's a false end. It's just a bigger version of that intimate moment between Sonic and Tails shortly before their fight. There's an explosion of emotion, a step too far, and then a retraction into familiar territory. What's a further retraction and more familiar territory than infancy? At least compared to the insanity of the previous chapter, Chapter 11 wraps up the fight arc quickly and cleanly. Rouge decides to raise Knuckles as her baby, and names her other baby Knuckles Jr. Sonic rescues Charmy Bee, who immediately heads home to work on his play. Side note, I love how they handwave a high schooler magically turning into a baby. "Knuckles' mom," said Sonic. "Some things happened and Knuckles looks different. It will be okay and you will understand soon enough. Please do not worry." Sonic said this in such a way that Knuckles' mom smiled and kept cooking in the kitchen. Sonic was not just fast, but also very good at relieving people. Sonic also noticed that Knuckles' mom was kind of hot, with solid boobs that she had developed for decades. The focus shifts to Tails, who has a difficult science test coming up. Cream the Rabbit suggests that he come over to study with her. An exciting prospect for Tails. Tails secretly had a crush on Cream and wanted to feel the body of his sexy friend always, even though she was Charmy Bee's girlfriend. Cream was a different kind of sexy that was only really sexy to some people, but Tails was one of them. With his friends preoccupied or engaged in conflict with him, Tails could only spray his dad's colon on himself and put breath wash in his mouth. After an awkward hour of studying, Tails finally reveals his true feelings. "Cream, I have lusted after your rabbit genitals since day one. I think you are the hottest woman I have ever been to. I know you are Charmy Bee's girlfriend, but toss him aside and let my penis murder everything inside of you." Tails took out his penis, and he was so in love that his penis was literally screaming. Cream, despite being in a relationship with Charmy Bee, is amenable to his advances. Here are some highlights of their lovemaking. She grabbed Tails' penis and began to give it a good shake. She loved his boner with her hands and pulled him around the room by his penis like he was a wagon to get him more excited. Tails' penis was about to burst like someone stepping on a tube of Colgate toothpaste. Tails could feel the semen bubbling up inside his penis like Santa going back up the chimney when he was done, and the presents he had left down in the house were Tails' balls, which were already there though. Once again, Cream, a cis female, has an erection. But their brief foray into lovemaking is cut short by Cream's sense of duty to Charmy. But at least they were ready for the next day's test. After that quick retreat, the narrator returns to the matters most relevant to him. Sonic writes in his journal, once again, about the sickness ravaging his balls. Sonic was done complaining about his balls and went to school. In history class, he talked to Amy. "Hey Amy," said Sonic to Amy. "Hi Sonic," said Amy and kissed him hotly like a girlfriend. "What is up?" said Sonic to Amy. "It is awful. I have bad news," said Amy to Sonic. "That stinks. Do you want to have sex later?" said Sonic to Amy. God, I love that exchange. Amy can't, unfortunately, due to having to go to the play. Sonic agrees to go with her, but only because that presents the possibility of sex afterwards. This interaction really highlights the tragedy of Sonic's monomania, and the wall it creates between his desires and Amy's needs. Later on, Knuckles Jr. suggests that they keep an eye on Charmy Bee, who has been acting strange lately. And again, him being a talking baby is accepted as a fact of life by his peers. Sonic's ball problem, meanwhile, is only getting worse. His balls were like two blimps covered in volcanoes that could fit on the blimps and itched as well. At dinner, his fortune cookie reads, "One man's pubic illness will cause the death of millions." Some people did not believe what fortune cookie said, but Sonic knew they were magic and were always right. So he was a little worried and wondered what it could mean. This culminates in Sonic's mom sending him to the doctor. The doctor is a bit of a non-entity and not funny at all, but he has some pretty interesting moments in this chapter. "I see from looking at your papers that your balls and penis are the biggest in your high school," he says. "Good job, Sonic." Then the doctor started doing tests. Sonic passed all of them awesomely, and even the doctor was surprised at how Sonic was the best at everything, except being smart, which Tails was the best at. But Sonic was still pretty smart too. Then they got to the last test, which was about Sonic's balls. The doctor took out a test tube and filled it with pieces from Sonic's balls, and he tested them with machines. The test results show that Sonic has a legendary disease that only comes around once every 1 million years. No one has ever found a cure for this disease, and what it can do is very bad. This disease will go from your balls to your penis and then up to your brain, and it can kill you eventually. There are other things that it does probably, but I do not know because it is so rare, and you will just have to call me up and tell me what it does when you find out. All I can tell you right now, Sonic, is to keep your balls away from everyone you know. Do not touch them to other people because it will spread, and they will die. And it will spread more, and the whole world may be at stake here. Sonic, who has a deadly disease that will eventually kill him, is devastated that this means he will not be able to have sex with Amy. Balls are an important part of sex. On that tragic note, the chapter ends, and Sonic races off to the play. Sonic thought about it, and it was the most important high school drama. What is more important, health or love? A bit out of nowhere, we shift focus to Shadow the Hedgehog, weaving through traffic in a cool car, passing lights and other things like places like McDonald's, and listening to techno and rock and roll music. Techno is short for technology. Shadow pulls up to a curb where 3 gangmen waited for him. He shoots all of them and finds what he's been looking for, the last Ultra Chaos Emerald. They were like the regular Chaos Emeralds, but more powerful and a secret until they were found out. Shadow goes to a hamburger restaurant, where he always goes after a crime, and throws the garbage into his car Omega's trash hole, where he turned litter into gasoline, which was useful. Shadow tries unsuccessfully to fit his big, strong penis into Omega's trash hole, and then sets course for Silver's house, all while gratifying himself. Shortly afterwards, he redecorates the inside of Omega with white curtains. After a brief and homoerotic run-in with the police, Shadow arrives at Silver's house. He braked the car so hard that the sound it made was like hearing the world's largest bird get punched in the tummy. Shadow honked the horn, and when he finished honking the horn, Silver jumped out of the window and onto the street and into the side seat of Omega. "Hey, Shadow, thanks for the ride," said Silver. "Cool curtains you put up." Together, the two drive off towards the high school, hoping to make it in time for the play. The play is a nativity story, even though it's nowhere near Christmas time. This is where the narrator's religious background really shines, seeing as how he doesn't seem to have any other frame of reference to draw on for what a high school play could look like. The telephone game version of events is also pretty funny. There was singing and songs, but otherwise it was just like the Christmas story always was. Mary got a letter from an angel saying she was going to have a baby, but she did not want to have the baby at home because the king would not let babies vote. So Mary and Joseph rode bikes all the way from London to Jerusalem. When they got to there, the hospital was full, so they went to a barn and had the baby there, and it turned out to be the legendary hero Jesus. Throughout the whole play, Silver did a really good job, and Charmy did an okay job, but everyone sure believed he was a woman because his voice was so high in girls. Then they got to the ending where Mary was to have her baby out. Mary flipped onto her front and Joseph pulled Jesus out of her butt, which looked totally fake, Sonic could tell, even with special effects. Joseph held Jesus up to show God and then gave him to Mary, who was actually Charmy. Charmy looked at Jesus, Knuckles, really close, and then reached into his clothing with the hand that was not holding him and pulled out a knife. "Time to get murdered," said Charmy as he started to kill Knuckles. Just as he began to do this, Silver bodily flew into them and knocked Knuckles up and away from Charmy. Shadow, ever prepared, pulls out a gun and shoots Charmy in the head. This proves ineffective. The bullet ricochets and hits the back of the stage, where the props were, and one of the props was a bomb that they used for some things. The prop was a real bomb though, and when the thing hit it, the bomb exploded. The bomb exploded with a huge explosion, like a bunch of horses made of fire running through the place. Suddenly, people did not really care about the play anymore because the place was full of fire and could kill you. Sonic regroups with a few friends outside of the auditorium, but realizes Tails won't be saved on account of him not being a woman or a child. Sonic swallowed his scary feelings and ran into the burning auditorium to Tails, who was passed out in the front. Sonic picked Tails up and ran and brought his body outside to the hallway and began doing CPR on his body. Sonic thought, "This will look gay," but it did not matter because Tails was still his friend. Sonic pushed on his body and started kissing him to give him life again. Sonic kept kissing and kissing, and Amy and Rouge and Knuckles Jr. watched him as he kissed Tails' face, but Tails was not waking up. Sonic is called away to look for Charmy, and passes the duty of resuscitating Tails to Amy. "I will let you and will not get jealous." Sonic kissed her mouth and felt one of her boobs, and ran off with Shadow and Silver to go catch the guy who was trying to kill baby Knuckles that was now running around the school and could danger them all. This chapter begins with two of my favorite author's notes. Author's second note. I fixie a typo. Author's note. I wrote this chapter on a train. Sonic takes a quick break from his pursuit to take an enormous, bad-smelling poop, which is actually going to be relevant to the plot. I keep coming back to this chapter because this is where the narrator plays his entire hand. One room that Sonic looked in was the art room. It made Sonic remember having art class with Charmy Bee. Charmy could not control his gay urges like everyone else, and used all the colors in every picture, where like Sonic just used blue, and Amy just used pink, and other people were also normal like that. If the casual and hypocritical homophobia throughout the story didn't make it obvious enough, the narrator struggles with sexuality and identity relative to his vision of what a man should be. It comes up a couple more times in this chapter in pretty quick succession. Shadow remembered about how he had car fixing class with Charmy, and how Charmy was really terrible at fixing cars because it was not in him to do something that was like a man would do. Shadow thought it was weird how Charmy could now do something that was so manly, like killing. And one room Silver ran into was the gym room, where Silver one time had gym class with Charmy Bee. He remembered how Charmy was positively the worst at sports and being an athlete. So it made him wonder why Charmy could do something that was actually doing something, like killing. I love that fixing cars, being athletic, and killing are the three barometers of manhood. It's a really middle schooler mentality. Amy and Rouge separate from the group to go to the bathroom. Curiously, during an active threat to the school, there's a line to the women's bathroom, forcing them to use the men's. The stench overpowers both of them, and Amy recognizes it instantly as Sonic's. Amy opened up a stall door, and inside what was a shocking thing to see, but she saw it anyways. It was Charmy Bee. "Ah, it's you!" screamed Amy in a scared and shocked way. "You're a murderer!" "Not yet," said Charmy, "but I will now start to be by killing you." Charmy jumped at her from inside the stall and into Amy, and they fell back. and Charmy was on top and holding a knife and was about to cut Amy apart when Rouge came over and kicked Charmy, and he flew off her body and over to the wall by rolling. "Take this," said Rouge, and she flapped her bat wings at Charmy to push all of the horrible poop air at him. It all went to him, but then Charmy got up and ran right at Amy with his knife and cut her on the legs because he is short, and then jumped back. "Ow!" said Amy. "I'm dying!" Amy fell backwards and got dizzy. "No, stay with me," said Rouge. "Use your special move while you can." Amy knew what Rouge was talking about, so Amy used her special attack. Amy shouted, "Girl blood," and opened her legs, and a stream of blood shot at Charmy. Don't worry. Since Amy was so good at being nice and caring, which is using your heart, Amy was able to speed up her heart so fast that her blood pumped out of the wound on her legs, like a super soaker filled up by vampires. I love that part. Backed into a corner, the two hold on to each other with their best in show boobs pressing up against each other and looking like the sexiest Legos ever. Again, the narrator's limited frame of reference oddly makes for the most descriptive similes I've ever seen. But before Charmy can deliver the killing blow, Tails bursts in with a piece of electronics, killing Charmy instantly. "Really, Tails, you saved us," said Rouge, and kissed Tails on the cheek. "This shows that you can be cool by being smart, except if you're a nerd ass." With Charmy the robot defeated, the lunch lady makes our heroes a bunch of chow meat sandwiches, and they all ate until their tummies were gonna burst. All the time while they were eating, though, Sonic thought, "But then where is Charmy? And where is the guy who made the robot? And so many other things. High school drama is just so crazy to be a part of." The uncanny calm after the previous night's events has Sonic passing through a numb day of school. His lunch table is starkly underpopulated. Tails was not here because he had been mad at Sonic. Knuckles was not here because he was now a baby and with Rouge. Espio was not here because he was at the hospital after fighting with Knuckles before he became a baby. And Charmy was not here because he was still in a disappearing mystery. The only people that were there were Shadow and Vector. All of a sudden, the announcement speaker came on. "Attention teenagers," said the announcement speaker. "Amy and Rouge have detention for going in the boys' room last night after the play. Please go there immediately." Sonic is devastated to hear this, as there's no way to become true boyfriend and girlfriend if Amy is trapped in detention. Sonic is charged with taking care of Knuckles and Knuckles Jr. in Rouge's absence, only adding to Sonic's shock. "Thanks for coming so quickly," said Knuckles Jr. "I was getting hungry." Knuckles Jr. was red. Sonic takes the two babies back to his house, advising them not to look at his pornos. He teaches them to write, stopping only to mow the lawn, which made his balls itch extra, and then he went back upstairs, but stopped on the stairs to put some soothing poultices on his balls. I don't even think that's an SAT vocabulary word. I don't know where he learned that one. The section that follows is interesting. I struggled to understand exactly what Firemaster's intent is here. Maybe you guys can tell me in the comments. "So what do you guys do for fun?" said Sonic to Knuckles and Knuckles Jr. "Well," said Knuckles, "can we tell you and you promise you will not tell anyone?" "Don't worry," said Knuckles Jr. to Knuckles. "I can tell he will not tell anyone." "Okay then," said Knuckles to Sonic. "When we are alone and not being held by Rouge, we like to practice kissing on each other. It is technically okay because I am Knuckles Jr.'s dad, and a dad is allowed to kiss his baby." Cool," said Sonic. "Show me." So Knuckles and Knuckles Jr. got very close to each other and kissed each other in a really good way. It was okay because they are father and son, and also both brothers, and that is allowed everywhere. And it is not illegal even if they are both babies now. The two of them kissing looked like two big, not sexual caterpillars pushing themselves together. It was not a sexual kiss, but it was a big gold medal kiss anyway. "Wow, I can tell you are both going to be romance experts when you grow up," said Sonic. "I would ask you for tips, but that would probably be against the law." Sonic asked them to kiss one more time, and they did. but Sonic videotaped it this time so that he would know how to kiss Amy even better next time they kissed, which would be when she gets out of detention. Then they all had root beer and talked about which girls are the hottest. That is so gross. Worse than the chicken cutlets thing, worse than the body donation thing. My only theory is that maybe this is an example of the narrator still trying to figure stuff out. You know, when you're in middle school, your hormones are kind of everywhere, and if you leave them unchecked while you're writing a Sonic fan fiction, it can lead you down paths that are a bit taboo. I don't know. Anyways, that night, Knuckles Jr. has a vision. He knows where Charmy is. Ass! Chapter 17 aptly begins as Sonic struggles to get a window open. "It looks like you are having a hard time," said Knuckles Jr. "Weak pussy." Knuckles Jr. laughed because he was kidding, but Sonic did not think it was that funny, and gave him a look that was like he just took the pickles off Sonic's hamburger that he pacifically asked for pickles on. In addition, Sonic really liked pickles. It becomes clear to Sonic that they need the help of someone strong, the Lunch Lady. The Lunch Lady, a deaf woman who comes from a different country every time her origins are discussed, effortlessly opens the window. When Sonic offers his thanks, she corrects him. They have a different way of thanking in her culture. The ancient tradition of sex thanking. Jesus Christ. Here we go. "Amy will forgive me for this," thought Sonic underneath his hair in his brain. "She would know that I am doing this for a good reason, and we have not even done sex yet, so she cannot be mad at me. And even if she is, I would let her give sex to the Lunch Lady too, and I would not get mad, but then we would be even." Sonic opened his mouth and chewed on the Lunch Lady's really hard, like Pac-Man running into the bottom of one of the ghosts nonstop. Her outer tasted like a birthday cake. His even popped up during this like a meerkat looking out for its family on Meerkat Manor. He kept on going closer and making sure to get every part of it on the way down, like a window washer in New York City washing windows, but instead it was her so it was sexy. Sonic even used his tongue and scooped eggs out that were made during the female reproduction process. Sonic decided it was time to finish doing this and shouted, "Yeah!" inside her to make vibrations bounce off the walls of her and hitting all of her sex spots at once. And then, once done, Sonic brushes the crumbs off his face. So now twice in a row, the narrator blinds us with the most egregious, wrong scenarios that he can think of and holds our eyeballs open to the sheer insanity of his language. It cannot really be ignored that Sonic is performing a sex act on an adult in full view of two infants. While this is funny in its shock humor, this shows that both Sonic and the narrator's sexual frustrations have the capacity for legitimate harm, to us as well as to other characters. But the narrative moves too quickly for us to even try to process that, instead showing us the next trauma. Sonic and Knuckles Jr. enter the house where they find Charmy B's dead body cut up and stuffed in a closet. "Oh my god, I am seeing so many shocking things for the first time today," said Knuckles Jr. Sonic went down and picked up a piece of his body and saw bite marks in it. Sonic was about to say something, and then all of a sudden this happened. "What are you doing, idiots?" shouted Vector. "How did you get in here?" "That window, bitch!" said Sonic as he felt a sudden rage build up inside him, like the foam from cream soda going over the top of the glass when someone pours it like an idiot ass. "What is wrong with you? Why did you do this? Why are you the murderer?" "Ha ha! Let me show you how," said Vector as he ran at Sonic and Knuckles Jr., chomping his teeth in the style of an alligator. Sonic thwarts Vector's initial attacks by hitting Vector's with his head. It was beginning to leave a mark, and it was embarrassing to Sonic to have someone else's mark on your head. "This better come out before school," said Sonic. This attack eventually causes Vector to climax. He creates a big long puddle like a slip and slide covered with mayonnaise. Sonic throws Knuckles Jr. on said slip and slide, and the baby glides like a baby speed bump and did a roller coaster turn and flew up onto Vector. This maneuver allows Knuckles Jr. to poke out Vector's eyes. As their fight rages on, Vector reveals that he was the arbiter of Knuckles and Espio's fight, as well as Charmy's death. He made friends with various terrorist groups, who made him the Charmy robot. Just as Vector is about to give Sonic death straight from his mouth, Tails swoops in and rescues him. "We are in the air now," said Tails. "I rescued you." Tails was using his flying tails to fly and was holding Sonic, who was holding Knuckles Jr. They were like a helicopter? "But I thought you were pissed at me," said Sonic with a questioning sound. "I am tired of being mad at you. We are best friends again," said Tails. Tails flew up, and then Sonic revealed his balls even though he could see almost the whole country from up here. He did not care because this was more important. Sonic scratched his balls and held on to Knuckles Jr., while Tails flew down fast again. Sonic's balls dragged behind him in the sky, and then they went down to the bottom of the ground, and Sonic's diseased balls smacked right into Vector's face. "No!" screamed Vector as Sonic's balls smacked into his mouth and nose and eyes like a plastic bag full of pudding. Vector looked into the sky and made an asshole face for the last time, and then he turned into stone, and then turned into dust, and was now dead. "I can be glad for once that my balls are very poisonous," said Sonic as he looked at the pile of dust that was Vector before he died and did some squinting. "He is dead, and everyone is okay now." With Vector defeated and Sonic's ball problem given narrative weight, the remaining high schoolers celebrate Vector's death, and don't seem to be much bothered by Charmy's death either. The next day, Sonic takes Charmy's severed head to the school's theater club, in the hopes they'd use his face as a mask. The rest of the body he throws away in the trash. Keep that in the back of your mind when other characters die. Espio comes back and is eerily unbothered by Charmy and Vector being dead. Regardless, he takes custody of Knuckles and Knuckles Jr. Everyone congratulates Sonic for doing such a good job, and the teenagers reach the conclusion that it's not worth worrying about Sonic's ball problem. In Espio's words, "It is okay, Sonic. Other people have problems and your balls are just like theirs." With Charmy's death, Cream and Tails are now free to consummate their lust for each other. They meet in a closet that is big enough inside for sex. When Cream takes off her clothing, Tails remarks that she looks like a beautiful naked man with a vagina. This makes him become as hard as a printer. The sex scene is standard Firemaster fare, in which Cream's breasts are described as two big melty gummy bears on her body. Cream's voice breaks, like a talking toy that had one of its batteries halfway out, and my brother spilled juice on it so it didn't work right anymore, and ends with Tails shooting a gallon of his own New England clam chowder. Tails' moment of triumph having surpassed Sonic in becoming a true boyfriend and girlfriend is undercut by a shocking discovery on his member. A ring. A bracelet. Amy's bracelet. Upon receiving the news of Tails' discovery, Sonic runs away, sure that Amy has been cheating on him, calling her a concubine and a loose woman. Sonic breaks into the detention room by violently assaulting the security guard and takes a key off of his keys thing. For some reason taken for granted, the high school stars you in detention. Another example of authority being some unknowable and cruel deity. Author's note. I am so happy because it is summer now. Woo-hoo! I am done with school for this year, but here I come, 8th grade. I guess I should be used to dramatic shifts in tone at this point, but Sonic brutally interrogating a starving Amy catches me off guard every time. In his rage, Sonic ignores Amy's excuses, his emotions running out of his mouth like a train full of swords. Sonic did not even notice he was crying, which was out of his eyes. Back at home, Sonic wallows in the injustice of it all, cuckolded and with the deadliest ball disease in the world. He dyes his fur black and tautologically looks like Shadow, but only similar. He gets a tattoo. Rather, he threatens a tattoo man into letting him sneak into the secret back room of tattoos for free that says, "F*** girls" on it, tantalizing himself by putting the one thing he wants most of all right over his heart. Sonic's new look and demeanor deeply unsettle his friends and teachers. He punches Shadow across the room, but manages to open up to Tails about his feelings. Tails mentions that, for some reason, Knuckles is still required to go through high school as a baby and is failing as a result. After school, Sonic works out until he becomes big and strong, albeit sweaty, and resolves to make Amy pay. After a morning full of looking at videos of cigarettes and knives rather than paying attention in class, Sonic watches his former friends eat lunch from outside the cafeteria. Even the lunch lady is disappointed and worried. After watching porn, he goes to a bad neighborhood under the cover of shadows. No one could see him in the dark unless you looked pacifically hard just for Sonic. He buys a few marijuanas and eats a couple. Sonic had really changed now from being the one with the best morals to the ones with the worst, like a seagull becoming angry because it would not get any breadcrumbs in the parking lot. Remember how the narrator said he was on summer vacation? His mind controlled by drugs, he goes to Amy's house, where she's sleeping on her bed like a DVD not being used. He breaks into her room, waking her a little from being in sleep mode, and punches her in the face. He was so mad and under the powers of marijuana, and he looked at her and she looked so afraid and scared, but he was still smiling and angry. Sonic's black rage was coming out through his fists with violence. Amy frees herself by kicking Sonic in the testicles, which hurts the hardest because it is like the information superhighway of your body. All of the drugs fall off his brain, and he realizes the gravity of what he's just done. For a moment, the two are completely still, like a couple of candy canes. With Amy toothless and terrified of him, Sonic runs out of the town and through the forest like a deer that could use a car, and falls off a cliff. The next chapter opens on Sonic's funeral at the funeral place. The funeral man, with great bedside manner, says, his body got so messed up he is dead for sure. Sonic is to be buried in the garden of the school, which is where he spent most of his time as a teen. Everyone, including Amy, mourns the loss. Sonic's mother cries, but not too loudly, like a honking horn on a bike that she was not squeezing too hard. Just about every character introduced hitherto is in attendance. By the way, this is the only mention of Blaze the Cat in all of Sonic High School. Blaze the Cat was not there because no one liked her and no one invited her. I don't know if that's some sort of fandom joke or what, but it makes me laugh every time. Shadow, Amy realizes, is missing as well. Shadow was dark, but even he was not dark enough to not go to Sonic's funeral. So why was it that he was not? Nevertheless, the funeral continues. Tails gives a brief eulogy. Then got up Rouge, who was holding up Knuckles and Knuckles Jr. like a sexy pelican carrying 2 watermelons in its mouth. I am going to miss Sonic so much, said Rouge. He was such a cool and nice guy with the best morals, and everyone knew his penis was bigger than everyone else's. Rouge was so sex-thinking, but it was okay because it is all about saying good things about the dead person at a funeral, and everyone nodded anyway because it was. The rest of the eulogies proceed like a conga line of being sad. Only Sonic's doctor sees the bright side of things. No more deadly ball disease. They had caramel because Sonic really liked it after that time he had it on Visician, and they had soda because it always made them smile. Soda makes bubbles, and it is cool, because how do they do it? Just as Sonic is to be put into the ground forever, Shadow appears. He reveals that he spent his whole life collecting the Ultra Chaos Emeralds, and he intends to use them here. Shadow raised his face up. I wish to bring Sonic back to healthy life. The bag glowed really hard, and everyone was making a big deal and talking and going around. The funeral man and his people got up Sonic's coffin out of the hole and put it back in front of everyone. The funeral man used his tool to open the coffin, and there was Sonic. He talked to him, shook him, and checked him for a hard beat, but no. Fairy tales are not real, and Sonic was dead. Shadow's failure makes him the target of the entire funeral's rage. He walks home without getting hit by any cars at all. His house is an all black and red place, like a volcano inside. It looked dark and cool, but not scary like a haunted house, which is scary, and it has ghosts. Shadow grabbed his sack and looked at his jewels. Upon doing so, he realizes there's one missing. The white one, which is less colored than the rest of them because it is not powerful in color. Shadow felt like a mother kangaroo who lost her baby after it left her front pocket and left it behind at the jungle, where there were dangerous things that would eat it. "I have to find it!" screamed Shadow like an Oprah singer seeing a ghost. Shadow uses his car Omega to find the location of the missing emerald, and finds a normal-looking house. When he breaks in, he finds Cream. Rather than reveal his true intentions, he tells Cream that he's here to seduce her. "Oh my god, Shadow," said Cream, looking shocked. "What?" Shadow felt a little nervous, but did not let it show on his face or his torrid genitals. "Yes, Cream, I want to pay for all of your children to go to school, but first we have to make some children." Cream is hesitant to comply, but finally decides to oblige him in order to make him feel better after the debacle at the funeral. Shadow's member looks like an anaconda having lunch at a Subway. Shadow got so far he almost filled up her lungs and she was coughing. Ellen was holding on. Ellen? Looks like the narrator fell for the Onision trap of conveniently forgetting what you named your characters. Shadow knocks Ellen out with his tumescent member in a piggy bank and then returns to work. He looks around Cream's room, which had a lot of posters on her walls of things teenage women liked, such as the famous boy band One Sonic Direction, and famous television shows like Gossip Sonic and Pretty Little Sonic and iSonic, and famous books like Sonic Twilight and 50 Shades of Sonic. Shadow looked through all of these things, and even in her lip gloss and purse full of teen girl blood diapers, and could not find it. Then he got to her jewelry cabinet and opened it, and there he saw the big ring with the big jewel that Cream was wearing at Sonic's funeral, and it was actually the Ultra Chaos Emerald. Before Shadow can even ponder how it got there, Tails flies into the room. Despite the initial concern, he doesn't even need an explanation for what Shadow is doing there. The penultimate chapter takes place before the preceding one, right after Sonic's funeral. Most of the main cast, except for Shadow, discuss their feelings, and Amy started to cry again because she is just so emotionally weak, like a goddamn child. You know, I can only imagine that's something the narrator's father once told him. "Being a teen is the hardest thing in the world. It is harder than being in a war or in jail," says Sonic's mom, which sounds like something out of Riverdale. Espio and Rouge, who looks burlesque, arrive at Sonic's house with Knuckles and Knuckles Jr., who look like shrunken presidents in their suits. Knuckles complains to Tails about how he's at risk to fail out of the year, which would mean he'd have to go back to the start of high school, which will cost him thousands of dollars in lost fees. He has to write about a news story or an event happening around town. Suddenly, Tails has an idea. "Hey, can you please both give me all of your baby teeth?" Knuckles and Knuckles Jr. took out their baby teeth and gave them to Tails. Using his technology and tools and good old-fashioned elbow lubricant, Tails glued all of the teeth together to make enough teeth for one normal person's mouth. The improvised dentures fit Amy like a Pop-Tart in most toasters. Then Tails went to Knuckles Jr., who was also there, and started to do a conversation with him. "Hey, Knuckles Jr., how are you?" said Tails to Knuckles Jr. "Good," said Knuckles Jr., "but sad, of course. I did not see this coming at all." Knuckles Jr. hugged his legs to his body like an imaginary tree that could bring its roots up and use them as legs. "Yeah, what is your deal? Are you really psychic? Because you were just a baby," said Tails in a curious way. "I seem to be able to see the future sometimes, but I cannot always control it. As you said, I am just a baby, but when I get older, I can probably use my powers to win the lottery and become the CEO of Progressive Car Insurance," said Knuckles Jr., and Knuckles Jr. was saying this to Tails. Tails finds Sonic's old electric guitar and improvises a song. His singing sounded like a beautiful butterfly telling its life story to a little boy who fell asleep on a bench in the park without losing his money to a common thief. Knuckles Jr., hearing Tails' song, enters the room but accidentally locks them in. This triggers an epiphany in Tails. He bursts through the locked door and heads straight for Cream's house. Now back in media res, Tails tells Shadow not to worry about what he's done. "I'm not a big fan of mysteries, so let me know if this grand reveal makes any sense to you." Amy and Rouge were in detention, and Cream wanted to help them before they turned into starving women whose reproduction systems died because they did not have enough nutrition to create a child ever again. So Cream decided to be a good friend, like I have always been to Sonic, and broke into your, Shadow's, room to steal a lockpick. She knew you would have a lockpick because you are always saying about how you do crimes in the city environs. So Cream went and broke into your room and stole a lockpick, but when she was there, she also saw the Ultra Chaos Emeralds and took the white one because it looked like riches. Then what happened was Cream, as a halls monitor, was able to go into the detention room because she had the power as an inside agent. She had the lockpick way up in her vagina as a hiding spot, because who is gonna look there even if a burglar comes to take her carried goods? She went over to Amy in a sneaking way, and moving her mouth without saying the words, by not making it sound but still making it look like she was talking, and not saying them in her head either because she was still doing it with her mouth so you could see, told Amy to reach up into her vagina. Cream's vagina was so small and junior at the time because she was not in love, so when Amy stuck her hand up into Cream's vagina, her bracelet got stuck in there and it stayed up there, and she could not even get the lockpick anyway because Cream's vagina was basically like a pencil case full of peanut butter. It was too hard and small to get up, but it was good at holding things, like Spider-Man? So Amy's bracelet was in there, and Cream had to leave before she became the biggest suspect ever, and Amy did not notice her bracelet was gone because she was so hungry and needing soda, and she put a new one on when she got home anyway, so it was like she did not notice. And then when Sonic died, Cream was wearing the last Ultra Chaos Emerald, so it did not work because the jewels have to be touching for a man to get off. A wish. Wow, it makes so much sense, and it is so obvious, said Shadow to Tails with a big eye face. I can't believe I did not think of that first. The matter settled, the two race to get Amy before they rescue Sonic from hell. Amy isn't thrilled to hear this. What? No, not again, you beguilers! Amy screamed and almost punched one of them in the face for doing another disrespect to Sonic's dead version. Listen, woman of the night, said Shadow in a disrespecting way. We are for real this time. Something was messed up and it was all Cream's fault. Or maybe even yours if you go back far enough in the way everything happened in the world. Let's go. It's not until Knuckles Jr. interjects on the boys' behalf that Amy agrees to go. They ran faster than a boulder to high school. Amy continues to express her doubts. Stop acting like a children. Tails thought Amy was being the Kraken of drama just because Sonic was dead. What we need to do is figure out, using our brains, how to get Sonic out of this hole. Tails rubbed his chin with his smart hands and tried to get his genius brain running like the engine of 10 red cars. The lunch lady appears in the nick of time and tosses the coffin right out on the ground next to it. The stakes are high. If Shadow fails again, they would surely put him under a citizen's arrest for being a public ass, and he would die, along with Tails. Shadow recites the Ultra Chaos Emerald prayer, and Sonic returns in a great flash of light. Blue, happy, and back to normal. Knuckles Jr. congratulates him for beating the world record for coming back to life by doing so in 2 days. Sonic was the fastest, and it is now proved completely. Amy forgives Sonic, and Sonic tells her he'd thought about her a lot while he was dead. But Amy no longer cares. She just wants to become true boyfriend and girlfriend after all, in front of everyone, just like they would have in the first chapter. Yeah, sex! Shouted Sonic. Sonic's penis was just the biggest penis anyone ever saw. It was like he had the World Trade Center sitting on his balls. His balls were super big, too, like beanbag chairs full of olives. Sonic decides to do a final systems check before taking off into the sphere. That night, someone noticed Venus was about 10 feet to the right of where it should have been. Amy proposes to Sonic then and there, and Sonic accepts. Everyone laughs and cheers as Sonic and Amy put their clothes back on. Hey, shouted Knuckles. Thanks. I got my story now. Knuckles waved a bunch of pictures of Sonic and Amy having sex in the high school garden area and the article that he just wrote attached to it. Cool, I am happy I did help you, said Sonic, winking, still feeling like Super Sex Sonic. Then, at the very end, we get a really good interaction from a new character. Yes, that is wonderful, said a big voice behind them in an important way. Hello, I am the principal of the high school. Wow, the president? Shouted Sonic. The principal tries to tell Sonic that he is the best, but in his humility, Sonic lists off the main traits of every character in the story, the things that they're best at. Tails is the best at being smart and flying. Shadow is the best at doing crimes and driving and being dark, but also being nice, so he is the best at being two things at the same time. Espio is the best at jumping and getting teenage women. Rouge is the best at seducing and being in love and a mom. Knuckles is the best at doing high school while still being a baby, and he was the best at fighting before becoming a baby. Knuckles Jr. is the best at being psychic and being cool while still being a baby. Cream is the best at being happy and kind of smart. Silver is the best at acting and being nice and normal and cool. The Lunch Lady is the best at making people happy and being strong. Sonic's mom is the best at cooking and cleaning. Miss Lesson is the best at teaching and being the nurse. Vector was the best at biting and making people mad, and Charmy was the best at dancing and singing, but now they are dead. I am the best at being fast, being moral, relieving others, and most other things. The president continues. I really want to thank you, Sonic. You really have the best morals. Everyone needs to learn from you about what high school is really all about. It is not about drama, and being mean, and being crazy, and getting mad or sad or making other people mad and sad. High school is about falling in love and getting married and maybe having kids. Thank you, Sonic, for showing everyone this. Also, Knuckles, I am very impressed with your story even though you are just a baby, and you passed this year of high school, and do not have to go back to the start and pay thousands of dollars in fees and charges. All problems settled, Tails reminds the group that it is summer now. The principal tells Sonic that next year they will all return to a high school named in his honor. The whole big group of everyone laughed and smiled and walked away towards the sun, ready to go have summer before they would have to return to the new Sonic High School. For a while, I was disappointed by Sonic High School's ending. Sonic really doesn't learn anything or get any kind of repercussions from his dark and violent period, or really truly reconcile with Amy. The narrator and a good chunk of the close third ensemble never acknowledge their barely repressed sexualities, leaving so much on the table, especially with Sonic and Tails' intimate moments. I mean, will Tails and Cream's relationship change, given what Shadow had to do to find the last Chaos Emerald? But frame stories, even good ones, are ultimately exercises in authenticity. What rising 8th grader is fully realized, self-aware, and ready to take on the world? I mean, what human being is? Maybe, if only for now, Amy's forgiveness is enough. Maybe Knuckles and Espio's kiss is enough. Maybe Tails embracing Sonic in his room and breaking through his shell when he is at his lowest is enough. I think there's a poignant beauty to dedicating such a significant chunk of the last chapter to the skills of other characters, to being happy with you and your friends the way things are. Dark Doom Firemaster is a genius when it comes to figurative language, and his command of voice and point of view make his work Sonic High School the Canterbury Tales of this era. It is not the worst fanfiction ever written. Even if it was, refusing to engage with it on those grounds would be reductive. I, for one, would have never met the narrator. He's unwaveringly earnest in his desire to tell the story of Sonic the Hedgehog and his sex-starved friends and become your friend in the process. He has no capacity for condescension, no snide self-awareness. He's a little weirdo, but he means well. Once he makes a couple friends in 8th grade, he'll probably end up alright. He could use a couple beta readers too, but one problem at a time.